Welcome to the Peacemakers Podcast, where we share conversations and reflections inspired by the Zen Peacemaker's 3 tenets of not knowing, bearing witness, and taking action. In today's episode, Zen teacher Marko speaks with her longtime friend Jeff Bridges. Their conversation begins with Jeff's role in the TV series The Old Man, where he plays a former CIA operative navigating a life shaped by secrecy, aging, and survival. Eve and Jeff's friendship deepened while working on The Dude and the Zen Master, a book of conversations between Jeff and Zen Peacemakers founder Bernie Glassman. What follows is a warm and deeply personal exchange on the experience of aging, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Jeff shares stories about illness and healing, the changing rhythms of creativity, and how age has brought new perspectives on vulnerability, love, and the quiet strength found in deepening intimacy.
I'm Marko. I've had the gleeful pleasure of knowing the guy to my left, I guess for 22 years, but getting closer to him as we talked and we worked together on the book, The Dude and Zen Master. And I think that started a stronger friendship that has survived even the death of the Zen Master. I got the idea of doing this when I saw The Old Man. And the very first episode, I'm watching this guy, Dan Chase, played by Jeff, and he's getting out of bed and he's tottering over to the bathroom and he's coming back to bed, going back to the bathroom.
Yeah, well, the show, it's called The Old Man, right? The intention was to play the part that was written on the script. And I'm like all of us, I'm, many faceted. I'm an old crippled guy like this, and I'm a young teenager. Got some preteen in me, and as an actor, you use those different elements. And, you start with the stuff on the page, the words, and then different aspects of myself that I can use. Some aspects I'll kick to the curb that don't really apply. And then if you're lucky, you've got a real guy, a guy who is really a CIA agent and knows what he's talking about. And we had Christopher Hutchinson, who was a former CIA operative. And so I got to just be with him, and he turned me on to so many things that helped me realize the character. Such as, I'll give an example. One of the things, I had heard about this in school and stuff, but Stoicism. I asked him, what's your philosophy of life, and so forth. And he turned me on to Stoicism in a deeper way than I had experienced before. And that really informed my character. I read a book kind of recently called The Obstacle is the Way. Now, that's kind of Buddhistic, isn't it? I mean, that's getting into Tibetan, Lojong kind of approach, leaning into what is appearing as the obstacle. And many military guys have that philosophy. And I noticed as I started to study it that I have it too. And it came in very handy when I was sick. I went through a couple of years of being very ill. And that was kind of my approach during those times, was to each little challenge, that's the path, that's the thing. What do I have to learn here? What is life giving me at this moment? Life is constantly giving, this. And often you say, but that's not what I wanted, an approach that I not only enjoyed, but seemed to work for me was, to look at this gift that's being given. I mean, as something truly to receive it, like who wants, give me some cancer and you got any COVID? I'd love a COVID. If you can find some COVID for me, that would be just terrific. Who wants those things? But that's what's happening. And receiving those apparently abhorrent gifts, there's some gold in there, man. Some really wonderful stuff. And, like most things we discover, it's about love. You feel, this is an experience that I had during those times, was how much love I had to give and wanted to express, and how much love was coming at me. Huge waves. And making that little adjustment about opening up to that rather than bitching about not being able to turn over. I had the oxygen was the big thing. I'd have to call the nurse. She would get my oxygen up. I'd make the move. I'd have to stay in that position for a while with the oxygen up, full blast. And so each of those little things, I could feel myself being tempted to bitch, but that was not serving me. It was to look at the little details. What is here that I could absorb that would bring me joy and express love and this kind of thing?
My God, we just take for granted our breathing. Oh,
yeah,
inhaling, but sometimes it doesn't work. And you had the COVID hit you in a really bad place, and it affected your oxygenation and everything. And I'm thinking about this, not being able to breathe adequately kind of makes me very vulnerable. I have asthma. And when I get one of those things, I feel so vulnerable. So I guess what it brings up for me is not just how did you feel at that time, but like as you and I and others get older, do you feel more vulnerable generally?
Yeah, it seems to bring up vulnerability, but also invulnerability. Having lived through different things, you said, "Oh, I can do this. I've done it." That my illness brought me close to facing my mortality. Get up, right next to it. Say, "Oh, people died. This might be me dying now." Okay. And to really, taste that and get into that. And then, I passed through that. That was what happened there. And now I'm alive. But I was very close, and I was in kind of surrender mode. I remember my doctors would come up to me and say, "Jeff, you're not fighting. You've got to fight." I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't know, who am I supposed to fight? What does that look like? I had no idea. I was in total surrender mode. And it's interesting. Everybody, not only the people who were experiencing that closeness to their mortality, but also the people who are close to the people who are experiencing their mortality. Every one of us experiences and expresses it so differently. And it was one of the big enjoyments that I got. Again, it has to do with love, as most stuff does, was my family. My wife, Sue, and Jesse were living together in our little house there in Santa Barbara and supporting me in the most beautiful way. But their styles of support were so different, and they would get into these fights with each other about, "No, you're not, this, you're not being emotional on that. Don't you realize what's happening?" And the other person would say, I just don't do that. I got to take a break, blah, blah. And out of that confrontation and that disagreement, what are you going to do? Well, one thing to do is to enlarge your loving capacity and hold all that disagreement and that tension, and say, we're all loving, we're all frightened, we're all vulnerable. Here we are together. What are we going to do? Well, let's just love each other and accept our differences and realize how potent what's going on is. this is some strong shit. And look what it's doing. Look at what it's causing. Look what behavior it's causing in me, you know, and in you. And wow, this is, you know, we can cherish this moment.
Jeff, let me ask you this. How do you feel towards your body now as it gets older? You know, I was remembering reading somewhere when you did True Grit that you did yourself the horseback riding scenes.
I love a horseback ride. Yeah.
Okay.
I've been doing that since I was a kid. Yeah.
But still, I mean, there are things you can't do now if your body resists or whatever, and you don't have the stamina. So in terms of, here's your body that has served you all these years, and now it's doing different things. How do you feel towards your body?
Wow. I think in life, I think what we're looking for, what I'm looking for, is intimacy, you know, really getting to know what's going on here is to the highest degree. You know, as we always talk, it's not knowing. That's there you finally get into that. But to get right up to the limits of it and really, you know, get into it, you know, as Bernie would say, grok it, you know, or dig it, you know, just dig your body, dig that you can't stand for more than 45 seconds, man. Isn't that wild? Check that out. Oh, I've got to get up and my back hurts. And then my back will say, okay, pay attention. Your back is hurt. What have you learned? What skills have you learned on how to get out of a car, you know, or get in a car, you know, turn all the way. Don't do the thing you did when you were a kid where you just you got to prepare when you get out of the chair. So all these little ailments and these little things, they're opportunities to learn how to do it, you know, learn how to do it, you know.
So when you think about it, when you get to this age, what have we left behind, or what is no longer important to us? That's what I'm trying to get to. What is now more important to us, and what is less important to us?
I care about everything as much as I always have. And different things have different charges on them. You know, different words are coming to mind. Hope, you know. That's kind of a dangerous thing, you know, you know, have this idea of this is how I hope it turns out. But I'm kind of hopelessly hopeful. I have that. I'm drawn towards a kind of future, I suppose. Authenticity comes to mind, you know. Who are you? Getting into that. And, you know, again, it's that not knowing place, but keep asking that, what am I? Who is this? What wants to be expressed? You only have so much time. Go for it, man. You want to express something? Now's the time. One of the things that I've been into recently, it's, you know, I like to play music. I like to photograph, all these things. But I noticed since my illness, I'm not taking as many pictures or writing as many songs. What I'm doing is I'm editing all that I've accumulated over the years and putting them together in different arrangements and how they're juxtaposed to each other and so forth.
So do you feel like maybe that's like a little summing up?
Yeah. It's a different way of approaching my creativity, you know, and that's kind of fascinating. It's not something that's particularly a good thing, but I'm just noticing I'm not as interested in taking pictures as I was. I'm not as interested in writing a song. What are you interested? Well, I'm interested in using all those things in a different way, almost like a collage, you know, putting it together in different shapes. And one of my music project has to do with emergent behavior. And that's a term that I got familiar with in this movie about our environment called Living in the Future's Past. I produced, and Susan Pichard directed it and shot it so beautifully. I'm really proud of the film. It's an interesting exploration into not pointing fingers about who are the bad guys in our environment, but why are we behaving the way we are behaving with this situation. And that, I think that it was kind of fascinating. But anyway, I learned about emergent behavior, which can be seen in the murmuration of birds or the schools of fish, you know. I mean, it happens all over nature. It's a constant emergence of there's a thing going on that the little tiny things that make up the big things have no idea what they're doing. And this was fascinating to me. It's like there's no leader. It's just that this shape wants to happen. And all the little parts have something to do with it, but it's not their physical being, it's their relationships with each other. And that fascinates me. And I tend to notice that going on all over the place. My daughter, Isabel, turned me on to a wonderful term. It was new to me. Liberating structures. What liberating structures, what I'm understanding, I'm just getting into it fairly recently, is that these are structures that cause liberation or that encourage liberation. And it's an intentionality that's really, I love it. And it's how the individual in the emergent behavior is kind of conscious of it. And there are, you know, ways that you can work on that can get your intentional love. I guess that's where it's going.
You know, Bernie used to say that we need new wineskins. He used the word wineskins. You know, we just need new wineskins to change new systems. In other words, there's nothing bad about structures, but we need new ones and more
well,
ones and more dynamic ones.
I think the thing I sent you a link to these two guys who I think developed it maybe, and they say, look at a forest, look how nature does it. You know, rather than having a boss whose ego and money and whatever has risen them to the top and he's going to tell everybody what to do. There's a way to connect with all of the parts and let this being that wants to be born come through us. That we don't, and again, we don't know. I don't know. You know, you don't know what the shape is going to finally be. But to acknowledge that there's this thing going on, there's this emergence going on that we're all a part of. You know, I get into that trim tab thing, you know, with Bucky Fuller, you know, that, you know, I tell the story quickly. Yeah. It's Bucky Fuller, you know, the guy who came up with the geodesic dome, a wonderful philosopher.
Buckminster Fuller, right?
Buckminster Fuller, yeah. And he made an observation with the big ocean-going tankers. He said, well, what a challenge the engineers must have had to create this giant rudder that turns the ship. You know, to turn that rudder takes too much energy. How did they figure that out? And then what was realized was this little rudder on the big rudder called a trim tab. And the engineers said, this is a much more efficient way of getting the boat to go where we want it to go. The little rudder will turn the big rudder, and the big rudder will turn the ship. And Bucky made the observation that this little rudder, this little trim tab, we are all trim tabs. This is a great example of how the individual is connected with society and our culture, and that all of us are so connected. I mean, God, if the COVID didn't teach us anything, you know, it taught us that. We're in this thing together, man, you know, and your little movement makes a difference. We don't know what difference it'll be, but this thing, you know, your creativity, your hope, I guess, maybe, I don't know, you say, this is the future that I would like to intend, you know. You say, oh yeah, well, I make a difference. Who am I in cahoots with? You know, the Sangha is the perfect. Who am I in cahoots with that can say, oh, yeah, let's go there, you know, and you do it. Yeah, you know.
So, Jeff, would you say that you're as like hopeful now as you were when you were younger?
I didn't spend too much time on hope when I was younger. I'm thinking, you know, I was just jamming, you know, just having a good time. Hope is a funny thing. What do you think? Talk about hope for a little bit, E. What do you think about that?
I think hope is good, you know, and I always remember Bernie saying, hope is good. Expectations not too good.
There you
but
go.
hope is
There you go. Yeah. That's the thing, is
Yeah.
not, you know, grabbing onto the result too much. But the hope, it's a fascinating energy, isn't it? That's where I think the hope is love, isn't it? I think it feels like a very similar thing.
But I'm very moved by what you say, that even as our bodies age and we're not as strong and not as energetic as we used to be, there's a sense that something is going on that's beyond me. But I matter in that whole movement. I matter regardless of what the day is like or what's going on with my body.
Yes.
my mind.
And
I
as
matter.
yes. And you know, the funny thing, it's a very youthful feeling. It's very fresh. I remember Bernie, toward his ending days, he would say, oh, I had this epiphany. I got to tell you, man, I can't wait to see you. And I never heard his latest thing, man. But he was, you know, as we get older, we still have those things. You know, when I was sick, people will say, you know, what did you learn when you were sick? Did you learn anything new? And what comes to mind is not really. It just, what I already knew became more intense. You know, so like intimacy was always something that I have dug, you know, growing up, you know, getting into it, you know, what can we do together that's, you know, really, you know, let's get into it. And you have an opportunity to jam, to dance. What can we do? What can we bring out? What can we tickle out of each other by being intimate with each other? And somehow that intimacy, it has to do with this emergence that's going on. You know, when we really are intimate, and intimacy brings compassion and empathy and all those things, that kind of leads us where I think that's where I want to go, sort of, you know. And it's frightening and I resist it, but there's a calling for intimacy.
The deep intimacy, when we're there, gives you a sense of how you are so much bigger. And only it's not you anymore, but whatever you are is so immense. But we don't get to that sense without intimacy.
Thank you for listening to the Peacemakers podcast. This conversation between Eve and Jeff invites us to reflect on aging not as a loss, but as a shift into deeper presence, deeper love, and greater connection to the life that continues to unfold within and around us. If you found this episode meaningful, we invite you to share it with someone you care about. And if you'd like to support the Zen Peacemakers, consider becoming a member or paying subscriber. Your support helps us continue sharing conversations like this and sustains our offerings, including Bearing Witness retreats and weekly free online events open to all. You can learn more at www.zenpeacemakers.org. We'll see you again soon with another episode. Until then, thank you for being here.